What up, what up? This is Drew Lyon, the voice, and we are back with another Day Talk here on Trust the Plus, with word and life coming together to make sense, right? Now, today I am at my home because recuperating, because again, I didn't feel good yesterday, but the word doesn't stop. And so today we're in Acts, and we're going to break down something very deep, right? And so today's Bible verse is Acts 8:35. However, I expanded it for context reasons. So we're going to do Acts 8:34 through 36. And it says, the eunuch asked Philip, "Tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else?" Then Philip began with that very passage of scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized?" So that ends the reading of that word, right? So the context here is that there's a conversation, right? And the conversation is between Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. Notice, right? The conversation didn't start off on the whole biblical proportion, right? In this discussion, this would be the equivalent to them talking about sneakers, right? Or video games, whatever the case may be. Again, our ancestors had free time, so going and dissecting the word and going back and forth in Old Testament was a regular thing, right? Especially Old Testament. So that was their equivalent to a sneaker conversation. But notice now, right? Where the eunuch asks Philip, right, who the prophet is referring to in a passage, he is reading from Isaiah, right? And so the eunuch's heart or his thought process gets caught onto something that creates a conversation, opens the door to have a conversation about the good news, about the word, about Jesus, right? And then this is likely, as most people pointed out, from Isaiah 53, the suffering servant is what Isaiah 53 is known for, right? The suffering servant being that of Jesus Christ. All right, it's not speculation. So don't get caught up in all the word things that says it's potentially or it's thought of to be. It is about Jesus, right? And so what's interesting is Philip uses this concern, and again, forgive the cold and the sniffles. Philip uses this concern, right, and this conversation to segue into about Jesus, but from the perspective of where the eunuch is focused at, right? And he essentially preaches the gospel to him by starting with the scripture the eunuch was already reading, but the scripture the eunuch was already interested, the subject that the eunuch was already talking about that connected and tied back into Jesus, right? Now pay attention to this, right? It's not a coincidence that the suffering servant is what the eunuch was interested in, right? Because if you don't know what a eunuch is, and forgive me for the gory details, right? A eunuch is a man or boy who has been castrated. They had their testes removed or mutilated. Hey, we all adults. Don't shy away. Be all right, TikTok. They can hear this, right? We got adult ears. So, all right, testes removed or mutilated. That's what it means. And so the word eunuch comes from ancient Greek words, eunin, ichin, right? Which literally means bed guard. And that's what they were used for in the beginning, mostly, right? They were used as chamber guards for their concubines and their women's and all this other stuff like that, fill in the blank, right? And they were great guards because, again, no testes, no hormones. They wasn't really having to worry about them being a threat, right? And so it was a very suffering role. You can imagine how suffering that role is, right? And it's not just that. Eunuchs was used for all kinds of stuff, especially because, again, they wasn't considered a threat, but they were put in such high-pressured areas of dealing with such suffering as far as not being able to have access to that part of themselves, right? And so Philip creates conversation about the word, about Jesus, right? In a way that connects to what the individual is feeling and thinking about. See, far too often, we want to turn around and share the word with people. And the reason why we keep coming off as like Bible thumpers or as over aggressive or as chastising or condemning is because we immediately start jumping into all kinds of different scriptures and everything like that, and we're not focused on the person's need, right? Jesus comes where you are. God looks to where you are at. So if you're going to have a conversation with somebody about the word, about God, you got to meet them where they're at. So the eunuch presents a question, right? And that question presents an opportunity. The eunuch's question was simple. Who is that also sounds like they're suffering? Hey, who is that sounds like they had a similar situation to my own, right? And Philip's response was to turn around and focus engagement on where his question was, which was going to point to Jesus. It always does, right? But in a way that still focused on what his needs was. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with that level of suffering? How does he know what it means to be a suffering servant? Or fill that in the blank with today's conversation. How does he know what it means to not have wealth? How does he know to go through abusive relationship? How does he know how to deal with betrayal, right? Fill in the blank, right? Jesus had to deal with it. And so Philip focuses on that response and the significance of it, right? Is it leads him to a life-changing conversation where the eunuch gets to turn around and see and understand Jesus from a perspective of what he knows, right? Of where he's at. See, we can't be forcing all this extra stuff and all these over knowledge on people who are beginning in their journey or never had a journey to begin with, right? And they're trying to start somewhere. And then too often we can completely turn them off by overwhelming them. So don't overwhelm people, right? Have conversations where people are at. And it don't always have to be a biblical conversation to point them to Jesus, right? Testimony is everything, right? What did God do for you? If you had a similar situation you could relate to with somebody, let them know from the perspective of what got you through it, right? And let them find the answer through that. Because again, something profound that was said by somebody else, and I've heard it many times over, right? Is there's a lot of people in this lifetime where you might be the only Jesus they see, right? And so that first impression is everything. Don't make it be one of condemnation, of hate, of judgment, but one of love and understanding, because that's exactly what Jesus was. And so that's all I got for you for today. And remember, no mess, no fuss. Always trust the plus. Peace.